So for the non-technical scientific me, kind of simplify it a little bit further. So I know you Cerebell focuses on patients with seizures, but specifically what do you all actually do and what does your technology do for this patient population?
So often when we think about seizure, we think about epilepsy patients. The seizures are transient. They are benign. Patient can live with seizures for years, and they are visible. Usually, you see convulsion. When you move to ICU and acute care patient population, the seizures are complete opposite. They are usually not visible, and patient can be in coma or just confused. And they are not transient. Patient can seize for hours or days, and therefore they are not benign. Patient, it can lead to very high mortality and morbidity. It's very similar to stroke. We say time is brain. The early detection of stroke is arguably the biggest driver for best outcome. Exactly same for seizure in ICU patients. So the guideline requires to have EEG, and EEG is the main tool you can diagnose seizure, especially when patients are non-convulsing, which is the majority of the patient in the ICU. So in the ideal world, the guideline require you get that diagnosis within an hour. And before Ceribell, not a single hospital on the planet can be compliant with that guideline. The best hospital would take 4 or 5 hours. A very good hospital would sometimes take a day. And small hospitals simply don't have EEG. So you see patient acquire secondary brain injury, which is long-term memory loss, IQ drop, or even die just because their seizure were not detected. And literally, you see this. I remember that video. It's an elderly patient. The EEG on the bedside was showing he's in non-convulsive status, which is a very urgent neurological condition, and he's in coma. And his daughter was sitting right next to him, not knowing that his dad is going through a neurological urgency because there's no tool to diagnose it. So our system, and the reason is because conventional EEG is very cumbersome to set up. Very few people know how to set it up and takes hours. So our system have a hardware anybody can set up in a few minutes. And then we have a machine learning algorithm that can perform as well as a well-trained neurologist and would tell the bedside physician who usually do not know how to interpret EEG data the instant result is the patient in status or not. So it completely transforms how seizures not only are detected, but also how these patients are managed because you can see how a patient can respond to the medication and whether or not you need to increase the dose or add the second line medication to the patients.
That's incredible. So, you talked a little bit earlier about in some ways it probably felt natural, building this company and the ideas and having more of that, creativity and, building your team. There's a lot of steps involved in building a company, from the original idea to fundraising to, scaling, building the product, right? There's a lot of steps. What was the most challenging part?
I think every year, every phase, there are different challenges, as of course, as very cliched. Maybe it's the most emotional episode I still remember, right? It was about fundraising. So this was exactly 4.5 years ago. And we had a prototype, but we did not have FDA approval yet. So we didn't have any product to sell. And this is often the industry could call it the death valley for the company. We raised the seed round, we used up the money, and we don't have product to show yet, and we need another $10 million. I was pregnant at the time. I was 1 month pregnant, so my goal was to raise the next round in 5 months, and hopefully nobody see. What happened was when I was still breastfeeding my son, he was 4 months old, and finally I closed that round. But I remember so many meetings that I would walk into the room with my big belly and with my accent, and as the first time CEO who has never worked in medtech before and have the product that's not ready commercially and tell the investor, please just write me a $10 million check. I promise you, we're gonna succeed. And understandably, most investors said no. And I'm just so grateful that we had one investor saw the potential in me, in the other founding team, and wrote us that check. And I'm so very proud that we're going to give him very good return. But that's probably the hardest times that when I delivered my son Aiden, we were about to file FDA. Literally, I was still on the bedside. I was 36, 37 when I delivered. He's a big baby, so it was a very difficult procedure. But I was remembering checking the FDA material and went back to work 2 weeks after I delivered after surgery. So yeah, but I would do it again.
Oh my goodness. Okay, wow, that is incredible. I mean, clearly the theme in your life is kind of beating the odds and doing a lot of the unexpected. So I want to come back to a couple of points you made there, but let's go back to one thing. So fundraising, I mean, the company is what, just over 6 years now. You recently raised a Series C. Congratulations. So have come a long way. And, to your point, first time CEO. So the CEO role has to wear a lot of different hats, especially along different stages of the company's growth from those early days to probably what you're focused on now. Tell us a little bit about kind of how your priorities personally as CEO, and then kind of some of your leadership skills have had to adapt and evolve kind of from those, year one to kind of where you are now, year six plus.
Just as the challenge each year at each phase is different, the requirement and what the CEO, this leadership skill sets also just really change every year. I think in earlier days, the first couple of years was a lot about being highly strategic and really make sure the product definition and the direction that I'm pointing the companies to go is the right direction. um, and um, and then a lot of it is to bring the best R&D team and to translate what the product needs, the market needs very clearly to the technical terms, and brainstorm with the team and find the solutions, find the technical solutions. So the first couple of years was very, very clinical, um, product focused and R&D focused. Um, and then we went through this 1 or 2 year phase of launching the product. And that's when it's a lot about, again, it's figuring out the puzzle, figuring out what does it change, what does it need to change physician and nurse behaviors because they have been doing this for 10, 20 years. We're introducing something completely new and disruptive. And how do we generate enough and more evidence to make that change? How do we refine our messaging? And most importantly, how do we find the right marketing and sales and commercial talents to do it, right? And the so I was the sales number one, as many founders do. And I never thought I would be a salesperson, but then I realized sales is actually the same as being a consultant. You understand your customers' needs and you provide the solutions. So that was a lot of learning about just how to launch a product. And I think the biggest, those two are just naturally in my core competence, I would say. So I did a really good job. It didn't challenge me at the leadership front. I think the biggest growth or challenge, they always come together, is the past, I would say, 18 months as we really grow the organization very rapidly and dealing with COVID. Um, it's really about how do we find the right people, and that's a skill set and art. It's hard to articulate and also see around the corner that what the leadership and the talent pool we need. And more importantly, how do I switch from the problem solver, which was who I am for the longest time, to just really empower the team to bring the best people and bring the best out of the team, and really step back and let the team shine and bring people who are better than me and can have years of expertise in field in domains we need. I think learn how to let go, find the best talent, and then bring them together and bring the best out of them is probably the biggest growth, and I think it's the absolute need for a good leader.
Absolutely. Well, it's easier said than done, but it definitely is always about the people for sure. I want to go back to a point that you mentioned earlier. So, early on in life as a child, you were basically told that your path was going to be different because you were a female, right? They said that you couldn't do science. And then you mentioned, you were trying to hide may not be the right word, but you were trying to fundraise and kind of make sure that people didn't really know you were pregnant, or keep that under the radar, whatever you what might have you. How, as from a professional career point of view, particularly in the more kind of recent years, in your journey as a CEO, how has kind of the female lens, was it harder to raise money, you think? Were there any instances where you were treated differently when you were trying to fundraise while being pregnant? Anything to that effect?
I mean, the fact is, I would never know whether or not the fact I'm a female or I have an accent, I'm Asian, that is that a factor? Um, if I think about rationally, yes, it has been probably, and it will always be a factor. Sometimes the bias is conscious, sometimes it's not conscious. But or and I would say what I have experienced with I count on the investors and partners who believed in me, because that for those people I know that's not a factor for them. They see through what's on the surface. They see the mission. They see what we created together as a team, and they see me as who I am as a leader. And I've been very fortunate to have mentors and investors who really believed in me and supported me. And I really see the past 2 years is for me to get out of the imposter syndrome and to get to the place that I'm confident, but I'm still humble and open-minded. And I can't tell you how good that feels to go through that transformation. Again, it's easier said than done. And I feel I can do that because of all the mentors I had.